The pack I've got on here has a base weight of right around 4 kilos, which already pegs it as the ultralight when it comes to a base weight. Anything sub 5 kilos, we would consider in that ultralight category. Well, what if I told you that there are still a few luxuries in this pack that make it a little bit of a bougier ultralight setup? So not only do I have a fully fledged one-man tent in here, I've got an inflatable sleeping pad and a quilt. I also have a pillow and a reclining chair. And that's all thanks to Nemo. And with a few compromises, you can even get that to potentially sub 2 kilos for those items. That's not including my clothing, my stove, and a few other items that are in this pack. And that sub 4 kilo mark doesn't include any of the consumables. So it doesn't include any of my water, any of my food, or fuel. But everything else I need for an overnighter, and hopefully to be comfortable, I've got in this pack. So let's set the tent up and see where we're at. So now we've got the tent and all the bits set up, I should probably explain what this setup actually is. So from Nemo, we have essentially a complete sleep system that comes in right around the 2 kilo mark. If you believe their minimum weight setup, which we're inclined to after measuring and weighing ourselves, we came within 40 grams total, 40 grams plus of what Nemo said, because officially this setup, according to Nemo in its minimal form, will be just sub 2 kilos, which is definitely considered an ultralight setup. We came in just over the 2 kilo mark, and to get to that minimum weight there are a few caveats that I'll go into in a little bit, and why you maybe don't want to make some of those choices and still end up with an ultralight setup. You just don't have that magical 2 kilo figure. So as part of this setup, you have your full sleep system and a few extras. So you've got the Hornet Elite Osmo one-person tent. You have a Tensor Elite sleeping pad, which is currently in the tent here. You get a Pulse quilt as well, so it is a quilt, not a sleeping bag. There's also a Fillo pillow, the Fillo Elite pillow as part of it, so one of the luxuries that you get in this setup that you might not consider otherwise. And there's the chair that I'm currently sat on, which is a Nemo Moonlite Elite chair. Now this chair is definitely the item that some would consider the most luxury of all, and a very easy way to drop a little bit of weight. But why would you? If you can get all of this for sub 2 kilos, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. And this chair also reclines. So it's not just a standard camping chair, you do have a little bit of luxury and a few extra features. But again, there are a few caveats to that. So let's get stuck into the setup a little bit more, and we'll see where you land on whether or not you think this ultralight setup is right for you. Let's start first with the tent, which is the heaviest item of this setup. And heavy is still a relative term, because with everything as it comes from Nemo, so that includes the divvy sack, which is its stuff sack that it comes in, poles, pegs, guy lines, everything. Nemo has a claimed weight of just over 800 grams. I'll pop the exact figures up on the screen now, and also how we weighed it and measured it with our own scales. Obviously there may be some discrepancies there because not every scale is going to be calibrated exactly the same. And as I mentioned previously, our weights were within a very tight tolerance to Nemo, so we're inclined to believe their figures are accurate based on their own scales. It's a twin skin, so you have an inner and an outer, and it is a freestanding inner pitch first design. I'll pop up on screen me pitching it now for you so that you can see that. And it pitches pretty easily. You know, you do have to pay a little bit more attention to pitching it in certain locations and places compared to some other tents, just because there are a few weight-saving things that Nemo have added to this tent, or rather not added, as the case may be, in order to make this tent reach that figure. But Nemo also has another figure, and that's 657 grams. And that's the minimum weight that this tent can get down to according to Nemo. But to get that minimum weight, and we're not just calling Nemo out here, this is a bit of an industry-wide thing, minimum weights often exclude certain features and practicalities that might make the tent or other items a little bit less livable. To get that minimum weight, that is the inner, the fly sheet, and the poles. There's no guy lines, there's no divvy sack, there's no pole sleeve, but crucially, and I think this is a little bit mad when it comes to the industry overall, there's no pegs. And because this is a freestanding tent, Nemo classed that as not needing pegs to freestand to be a structure. And while that is technically correct, you can probably tell it's a little bit windy today. If I didn't have this thing pegged at all, it wouldn't be sat behind me right now. I'd be chasing it over that way somewhere, probably scaring a lot of the deer in the process, wondering why on earth there's a giant grey thing flying towards them. You can make your mind up whether I'm the giant grey thing or that's the giant grey thing. In that state, you would expect to be able to find sticks, rocks, other things like that that you can use to tether the tent. But why would you when, with everything included, it still comes in right around the 800 gram mark? Take pegs, take extras, take some extra guy lines so that you have a little bit more adaptability, making this tent a little bit more Rightweight, but still very much an ultralight tent. But I'll circle back around to that in a little bit because I have more thoughts and feelings about some of the other items in the setup. Let's talk a little bit more about the Hornet itself. So the Hornet, as you might have guessed from the name, uses Nemo's Osmo fabric. Now, Osmo fabric is Nemo's proprietary blend of material that is designed to be more water resistant for a longer period of time and have less sag than a traditional lightweight nylon fly sheet. Because when nylon gets wet, it tends to sag and you have to retension the guy lines. Nemo's Osmo fabric has been designed to try and mitigate that, and in practice, it works very well. And the Hornet uses an ultra lightweight version of the Osmo fabric to get to the weight that it is. And it still has a hydrostatic head in both the fly and the floor of 1200 millimeters. That might not sound like a whole lot. And in practice, the fly sheet, absolutely no issues. It will bead and rain will roll off because it's under quite a lot of tension. The floor, if it is particularly wet ground, or if it's a little bit stonier underfoot, or you're at risk of pitching somewhere where there might be a few more sharps on the ground. All of these reasons are why I would personally be adding a little bit more weight to this and taking the 75 denier recycled nylon footprint. And that's not a criticism. This tent is really designed for fair weather use. It will stand up to a little bit of rain and a little bit of weather punishment, but you have to expect the limitations that you get from a tent of this size and weight. If you're going to be camping in really bogging conditions where it's blowing an absolute hoolie, this isn't the tent for you. But Nemo and others that we stock do have options that will be a little bit more suited to you, but you have to expect them to be a little bit heavier than something like the Hornet. So let's talk about some of the features of the Hornet. Whilst there are some features on this tent, it is a little bit more minimal than some others in Nemo's range, but that doesn't mean that you are completely devoid of any luxuries and any features that you might like in this tent. So on the outside, you do get additional guying points. And in the divvy sack, there are guy lines that are ready for you to tie and attach, but the tent doesn't come with those additional pegs that you would need for those guy lines. But it's a nice nod to have that so that you can uprate this tent a little bit, make it a little bit more stable in adverse weather conditions. If it's going to be a little bit windier, you're camping a little bit more exposed, having those extra guy lines on this tent are a useful feature. You also get tie backs for the doors, both the outer and the inner, so that you can roll back the door like I've done here, just to give yourself a little bit more exposure to the elements if you want it, or you can fully seal the tent down and it pegs out with the door so that you've got a nice sealed in enclosure. Talking of sealing in though, the fly sheet on the Hornet is a little bit higher cut than it is on some other tents. So that was a design choice by Nemo in order to save a little bit of weight. They have compensated for that by putting in a slightly higher bathtub on the inside of the tent to have an overlap. So you've got the outer of the tent and then you've got the inner that sits a little bit higher with the Osmo fabric again. In combination with the no-seam mesh, Nemo do still include their nightlight feature, which is on a lot of their tents. So there's a little pouch in the top of the tent on the inner where you can nestle a head torch or a lantern, which is just a nice little add-on. On that inner, you also get guying points so that you can tie an internal washing line so that you can dry kit if you need to, if you are out and it has got a little bit wet, which again is a nice little feature that Nemo didn't have to include. Those were a few measly grams that could have been saved, but they chose to add in extra functionality, which is a really nice thing to have when you're having something that is this lightweight. Being a one person, you do only have one entrance. They do also do a two-person version of this tent, which I'll pop up the details of on screen now, and it does differ slightly, but the main one being is that it will more comfortably accommodate two people. And when it comes to the comfort, that is somewhere where I do personally start to struggle a little bit with the Hornet. And that's not just the Hornet, it's kind of one-man tents in general, one-person tents in general. Being over 6 foot, so I'm 6'3", I don't find that there's really enough space in there for me to be fully comfortable. Lying down inside this tent, which I can do because according to the spec sheet, I have enough space, and having tested this and got inside this tent, I do fit. When I'm on a sleeping pad and when I have the quilt with me, I am very close to, if not touching, either the head end or the tail end of the tent. And that's why I would make a bit of a Rightweight choice myself and move over to either the 2-person version of this tent or a bigger, heavier tent all in. And that's just so that I have a little bit more luxury of space. I like the ability to have a little bit more admin space. If I have a 2-person tent, I then no longer need to keep my pack underneath the fly. And on these tents, because that fly is higher cut, you are more at risk of your pack getting a little bit wet. Not a problem with the Black Diamond Beta Light pack that I've got behind me, because that one is waterproof. But it's nice to be able to have that extra space for admin. It also means that the internal height of the tent will potentially be a little bit higher. So when I'm sat on the pad in there, my head is touching the ceiling. Again, not really too much of a concern, and most of you will probably find this tent a little bit more comfortable, especially if you do sit below 6 foot or you don't have a particularly long torso. But it is just something to consider. 1-person tents aren't the most comfortable places to spend long periods of time. You have to be comfortable with yourself in order to be comfortable in a 1-person tent. And as I say, not a criticism of the Hornet in particular, just 1-person tents in general. And this is certainly going to be more comfortable than the other ultralight alternative, which would be a bivvy. You can't sit up in a bivvy at all. Once you're in a bivvy, you're going to bed. Moving on from the tent, we'll jump into what most of you will probably find the most polarizing part of this setup from Nemo. And that's the Moonlite Elite chair that I'm sat in right now. Most of you in the ultralight community would argue that that's a very easy way to save just over 500 grams. At its minimum, this chair, according to Nemo, comes in at 523 grams. We measured it just a tiny bit heavier than that, and we're talking a handful of grams. Again, I'll pop the exact figures up on screen as we measured. And yes, absolutely, there are ways that you could cut this weight out and then turn this into right around a 1.5 kilo setup. And if that's what you want to do, go for it. There's nothing stopping you. But this chair helps make this whole setup a little bit more Rightweight, because you still have a very lightweight ultralight setup, but you've got some luxury. And this chair has that in bounds because it's more comfortable than sitting on the floor. It keeps you off the ground, so if the floor is a little bit wet, you don't have those issues. It's nicer to sit and cook, and if you are in more of a group environment, it's a little bit more social. Could you do the same thing by swapping this out for a foam sit pad like the Nemo Chipper? Yeah. And if I was on a solo adventure, that's probably what I would do, because I still have something that I can kneel down on, I can sit down on, but I'm not going to be sat down for as long, because when I get to camp, if I'm here by myself, it's going to be a little bit more functional. I'm going to be sitting down to cook, I'm going to be prepping for bed, and then I'm going to be in my tent where I can sit on my sleeping pad instead. Their minimum weight for this chair is literally just for the chair itself. So as the chair sits, like this. So you have the chair, you have the recliners, and you have all the poles. What that doesn't include is this. Or these, which came along with it, but they're for the quilt, which I'll get into in a sec. So this might look a little bit strange. And this is the burrito roll that you roll the chair up into. So for storage, you roll it up into here, and it keeps it nice and secure, because that's something that you do miss out on by going for the minimum weight. Although Nemo do also include a small round of elastic that you can use to tether the main chair together. It doesn't fit the fabric body of the chair in, but it does keep all the poles together, because the poles will have a tendency to try and open out if you don't have them secured somehow. So this helps with all of that, but it does add extra grams to that weight. But this again is another feature that I'd recommend keeping hold of to keep it a little bit more Rightweight. So I'm not using it today because the ground underneath me is fairly firm, because we haven't had a whole lot of rain over the summer in the UK. But if I was camping on slightly wetter ground, or if I was on sandy ground, softer ground in general, this acts as a ground sheet. So you can put the 4 corners, so the 4 feet, into the 4 corners of this. and then set it down on the ground, and it helps distribute your weight over a softer surface so you won't sink in. Because if I was sat on softer ground right now with the diameter of the feet on the Nemo Moonlite, I'd be sinking in and possibly getting to an angle where I'm not comfortable, or when I go to pull the chair out, that could cause a little bit of damage. So this really useful feature, just not using it today because I don't need it, but I'd still recommend carrying it because it adds a little bit more functionality that you would otherwise miss out on, and you're still keeping the whole setup ultralight. Now if we move over to the inside of the tent, you can probably tell it is a bit of a pokey environment in there, but it's a one-person tent. They're not supposed to be super roomy. So you've still got 3 items left in this setup. And these are what you're concerned with when you're actually sleeping, which is quite a crucial part in the outdoors. You want to make sure you are comfortable. Without being comfortable, you're not going to get a good night's sleep. You're then going to be grouchy, you're going to have low energy, you're going to have a worse time in the outdoors. So Nemo have really concentrated on this part of the setup to add in a little bit more luxury again. And the first is really easy. That's the Fillo Elite pillow. So you could save a little bit of weight again and just use a jacket in a stuff sack, which is what I do most of the time. But this thing, according to Nemo, weighs 80 grams. As I measured this one earlier, it actually came in a tiny bit lighter at 72 grams. It also stuffs into a pocket that's integrated into the pillow itself here, and it's smaller than an apple. If you can't fit that into your system, you're doing something wrong. This is super small, super compact, and more comfortable than a jacket. What more is there to say on it? It's just a really lightweight, comfortable pillow that can elevate your sleeping beyond what you normally would. Take a pillow with you, 80 grams, bit of a no-brainer. Now, because I've moved to the inside of the tent, I am also now sat on the sleeping pad. Now, this sleeping pad is another bit that's quite special. So this is the Tensor Elite sleeping pad from Nemo, and at its absolute minimum weight, so just for the mat itself, no pump sack, no stuff sack, literally just the mat, Nemo have a claimed weight of 235 grams, which at the time of making this video makes it officially the lightest sleeping pad on the market, lightest inflatable sleeping pad on the market. And it's still 8 centimeters thick. It is tapered, so your mileage may vary on whether you prefer something that's a little bit wider, rectangular and wider, that will be a little bit more comfortable. I'm one of those people that does prefer a wider sleeping pad. I tend to be a bit of a side sleeper or move around a little bit more, so I prefer a little bit more space. But to save a little bit of weight, Nemo have gone tapered with this. It is an incredibly light denier fabric. So it comes in, it's a proprietary fabric blend that comes in at 10 denier, which is really light. Take a repair kit with you. All being well, this will be absolutely fine. This pad is comfortable and durable for its weight, but that's the crucial bit here, and that's something that goes for this entire setup. It's really durable for its weight. You will have something that will be more durable, that will stand up to more long-term punishment, more abrasion, the odd thorn, rougher ground, anything like that, if you go for something of a hardier denier. But that's not what this setup's about. This setup is designed to be as ultralight as possible for a 2 to 3 season use. And it really is closer to that 2 season use because the sleeping pad has an R value of 2.4. So that really does put it as a summer mat. You could use it at the tail end of spring into the start of autumn. And if you're a warm sleeper or you're in good conditions, you should be absolutely fine. But it is worth bearing in mind that as the conditions get a little bit colder, and even in the UK, even in the middle of summer, temperatures can drop quite low. This mat at R2.4, you've got to make sure that it is right for your setup. Now, I do have one thing to call out with Nemo on this pad. Trekitt only stocks the regular size, but Nemo do also make it in a short length as well. Nemo don't make this in a long. So at 6'3", I hang off the end of this mat. It's not the end of the world. I can still sleep on this mat and it's not too uncomfortable. But not making a pad in a long seems like a bit of a strange choice, especially when they make the quilt, so the pulse quilt that I'm going to talk to you about in a second. They make that in a long. So you can have the quilt from the setup, the tent is long enough, but the pad is a little bit short. For most of you, that won't be an issue. Again, that is very much a me problem because I'm a taller human being. But I would also be swapping out this pad for a rectangular one that is long wide. Yeah, I'm probably doubling the weight on it if I was to go for something like a Nemo Tensor Trail or an all season, but I'm going to be a lot more comfortable. And that's something that's worth considering, is whether this is going to be the right pad for you. And for you ultralighters out there, yeah, absolutely, it'll be the right thing. But is it the right weight for everyone? And that's only a decision that you can make, and that's the beauty of Rightweight. You can decide whether you want to carry as little as possible, have a 4 kilo base weight pack and have a great time, or you can carry a little bit more weight and have a little bit more comfort. The choice is yours. Everyone's mileage may vary and everyone has different adventures. It's part of the fun of it. But let's move on to the last item now, and that is the quilt. So Nemo have chosen to go for a quilt rather than a sleeping bag to save a little bit of weight. And that's a really smart move on their part. Because realistically, when you're in a sleeping bag, apart from feeling more contained and trapping in a little bit more heat that way, you're compressing all of the insulation against the pad, so you're not benefiting from it on your back. So most of the insulation, everything that you need, is on top of you. They have also included a closed-in foot box, so it feels a little bit more comfortable so that you do trap in a little bit more warmth around your feet, which is a key area for heat loss, and just feeling a little bit more secure when you're sleeping in it. Now, as I did mention, and got them out prematurely earlier, the quilt does include removable straps so that you can attach them with clips to the pad, and that will secure it in place, keeping it a little bit warmer and stop it from moving around and falling off, which is more of a possibility with a quilt than it is with a sleeping bag. But that's another area where Nemo's minimum weight comes into play. In order to get the pulse quilt in a regular, which is the size I've got here, and by the way, even though I am 6'3" and it tops out officially at about 6 foot, in practice, I have just about gotten away with the quilt in the regular, so you can save a few grams there if that's something you're considering. But with that quilt, to meet the minimum 500 gram mark that Nemo have said, you lose the straps and the included stuff sack. Is that the end of the world with the quilt? No, not really, but there are more features that you're going to lose. So that stuff sack means that you can get the quilt a little bit smaller and also acts as a little bit of protection for the quilt because it's an incredibly lightweight denier material, and with 1000 fill power down inside, you really don't want that material catching and getting down everywhere, because at 1000 fill power, that down is getting everywhere. It's super light and lofty and fluffy and insulative and works incredibly well at what it does, and it packs down super small, but the best way to pack it down is inside the stuff sack. So again, take the stuff sack with you and the clips. They come in adding on about 80 grams to the total setup, but they're totally worth it. The other thing with the quilt is part of Nemo's Endless Promise scheme. And Nemo's Endless Promise scheme is something that's pretty cool. They've also chosen to use materials of a lower environmental impact overall, and that goes for the entire setup, so not just the quilt. So there's the rundown of the Nemo 2 kilo setup. Realistically, this setup isn't going to be for everyone. It is definitely an ultralight setup that a lot of you will probably find a little bit too lightweight for the amount of use that you're going to put it through, because it is durable for its weight. That's the crucial thing here, for its weight. If you're going to be using a setup like this a lot and you're going to be punishing it, it will show signs of wear sooner than heavier duty outdoor equipment. But that's a sacrifice you have to make when you're going for an ultralight setup. Whether you want to sacrifice the extras that make this setup a little bit more complete to get that 2 kilo figure is very much a personal question. For me, I'd be carrying everything and probably making a few adjustments to this setup to make it heavier again. So I'd swap out to a long wide sleeping pad, and I'd take a few extra pegs and tie on the guy lines to this tent that come with it in the divvy sack. But apart from that, this setup is really quite compelling. It's a setup that you can take direct from Nemo as it is and still have an ultralight setup and know that you're going to get a little luxury with it too. You know, how many ultralight setups have a reclining chair in them? How many people will forego a pillow just to save a little bit of weight? If that's the right weight for you and you want to go for the lightest, smallest pack size, Nemo have got you covered. But they've also got you covered if you want a more substantial setup, you're willing to carry a little bit more, maybe move a little bit slower. but it might be a more enjoyable and comfortable experience along the way. Think about that. If there's any other things that you would like to know about any of this setup, any comments or queries you have, pop them down below and we will get back to you. Time to pack this setup up and get out of here. And I know I'm going to get out of here a little bit quicker because I'm carrying 4 kilos. See you in the next one.